All right, let's get started. First, I want to queue up the topic, and I'll introduce our panelists after I do that. So the general definition of benchmarking is a standard or a point of reference against which things can be compared or assessed. In the water use efficiency world, we want to compare water use among similar businesses to identify efficient users versus inefficient users so that we can effectively target our conservation programs. And a customer may also want to do some internal benchmarking where they implement an improvement process and they can go back and look and see how they're doing. And this topic is fairly timely because the state has released a proposal for water use efficiency legislation that includes classifying CII customers. And that really is a first step towards, but a very important first step towards the benchmarking process. So now, all right, so now I want to introduce our wonderful panelists. I'm going to do a quick introduction and bio. We have Martha Wright. She has a Bachelor of Science from and an MBA specializing in data analytics. She's right over here. She initially worked in energy efficiency and then went into conservation. She works for San Antonio Water System. She's leading their AMI program conservation efforts. And then next we have Kim O'Kane. She's right here in the front row. She is the CADC member experience specialist. She's also an adjunct professor at Santa Monica College. She has over 20 years of experience developing and implementing conservation programs, also policies and public outreach. She wrote the Department of Water Resources Model Water Efficient Landscape Ordinance Guidebook too. Then we have Gabriel Peredo, right over here. He's with RHA. He has 21 years of experience as an electrical engineer. He's currently a senior director with RHA, where he leads development and execution of energy efficiency, water conservation, construction management, and programs for utilities, government, school districts, and other CII clients. All right, so now we're ready for Martha to come up and provide her presentation.
Okay, so I have to be faster than it's able to go on its own. So if the slides go faster than me, I'll try to hurry up. But let's go forward. Okay, so thank you for the introduction, Stephanie. I'm Martha Wright. I'm with San Antonio Water System located in San Antonio, Texas. And I'm excited to be here today talking a little bit about CII benchmarking. So before we get started on that, I just want to give a little background on SAWS and why we've gone down the road of doing CII benchmarking. We are a large municipally owned utility in South Central Texas, a very drought-prone region. We're in a drought right now and hoping for some rain. But our primary water source for decades has been the Edwards Aquifer, which is a highly regulated aquifer that lies just below the surface of our city. And so see, it's going faster than so because of that, conservation has been a way of life for decades. And so you saw what's on the next slide already, so I'll go to it. But conservation is also part of the story of the River Walk. And so in San Antonio, we have one of the largest recycled water systems in the country. And that provides a lot of water for not only the River Walk, it provides most of the water that's in the river on an annual basis, but it also provides a lot of water for our commercial customers. So we've seen a lot of reduction, both for reduction in use, both from our recycled water system, but also from conservation over the years. We've had conservation programs for about 35 years in San Antonio. And the three main focuses of those programs have been education, incentives, and reasonable regulation. Over the past 30 years, we've seen an increase. Going back, over the past 30 years, we've seen an increase in our population of about 80%. But we've only seen water use for that's needed across the entire community increased by about 20% over that same time period. And so that's a testament to our conservation initiatives. Thank you. So this slide kind of gets into why we're doing, why we started doing some benchmarking. We would show a graph like this slide here, this graph here on the left, showing monthly use per bill or annual use across the commercial sector in San Antonio. And people in our community are very tuned into water use and water data. And they would ask, well, why are you comparing parks to apartment buildings, to a coffee shop down the street, to manufacturing in town? And so because of that, there's no mandate for CII benchmarking in Texas right now. I know there is now in California, and I'm excited to see where all of it goes for California, but there is no mandate for us. And so we embarked on this on our own, trying to just figure out what it would look like for us to start doing some benchmarking. Thank you. Okay. So in 2018, we started coding our customers. We have about 40,000 commercial accounts at SAWS. We have about 550,000 accounts, almost 600,000 accounts overall, mostly residential accounts for our service area. But we started coding our accounts and knew that this was going to be a big project. And so the first thing we did is we hired interns, and I'm not joking when I say that. We hired interns who helped us with our coding process. We coded our accounts pretty manually, but we decided to use 6-digit NAICS codes, North American Industry Classification System for NAICS. You can also use CIS codes. There's a lot of different avenues you can go when you decide to start coding accounts, but we went with 6-digit NAICS codes. One, because we didn't want to have to go back to 40,000 accounts later on and have to recode them if we only coded to the first 2 digits or only to a high level category. And also because we wanted the flexibility later on to be able to, on the next slide, you're going to see that we set up a crosswalk where we kind of compare codes and group them in larger categories. We wanted to be able to change that as needed moving forward. But the big thing here is that we coded, and this is the big thing that I stress to anyone who's embarking on doing any kind of CII classification, code based on the primary water use of the property. Don't try to code based on the business practice of the property, because for San Antonio, we have a large grocery company that's headquartered in San Antonio. It's H-E-B Grocery Company, if you've ever been to Texas. And they have hundreds of grocery stores across our service area. They also do manufacturing, and they also have their headquarters in San Antonio. And so if we coded those all the same based on their business practice, we'd code them as a grocery company, but that's not how they use the water. And then we store that data in we're using Salesforce as our CRM, but all of our data could have been stored in Excel, in Access, and any other database management tool. And then when we initially started, we were trying to figure out, like, where do you start, right? Like, what's the first account that you're going to code? And you have to start somewhere. Our goal was to code as many accounts as possible and as much water as possible. And so we looked at common names in our billing system. That's a quick way to code all of the Starbucks or all of the McDonald's or all of the H-E-Bs in our case. And so we coded all the accounts that we could, and then we also coded the accounts that had the highest water use. So this is an image of our crosswalk. This is just kind of a sampling of it. We set up a crosswalk where we can look at all of the codes in our system, and then we group them into 19 major categories. I believe they're very similar to the categories that California is using, but they may have changed a little bit since I last heard. But with this, we're able to then say that a code falls into manufacturing or offices or vehicle wash or whatever it is. So just to go to the next slide now. Sorry. So once we did that roll up, now we can look at how many accounts fall into each category and how much water use that is in each category. And so we know, I just called out 2 here, offices and manufacturing. We know we've done a lot of work in San Antonio with manufacturing and trying to address their water use over the years. And so that's not going to be the first one that we go for. Thank you. The first one we go for is actually banks. And you're probably thinking, that's interesting, a bank. How much water does a bank use? They have maybe a kitchen, maybe a bathroom or two. But we're going with banks because we know that in San Antonio, every bank or almost every bank also has an irrigation system. And that is an easy thing for us to target at SAWS because we already have programs to target irrigation systems. And so we can use programs we already have and be able to reach out to customers. This is also a place for a little cautionary tidbit as you start using data that with all the codes that you've done, especially when you've done as many as tens of thousands of coding, you'll realize that once you pull all the banks and you look at it, the highest user is actually a large office building that is owned by a bank. And so that was a chance for us to recode that property and code it as a bank, which is or code it as an office building, excuse me, which is what it actually is. And so with our banks, we are now educating properties that have higher water use than other banks. And we are going to offer programs to help them decrease their use primarily through their irrigation systems, but we'll address it through leaks and other things as needed as well. So going forward, we're going to continue our education and incentives. We're starting with banks, but we will move on to other topics, other areas going forward. But then we also have the challenge of needing to continue coding accounts. We have new accounts opening in our service area on a daily basis. I think that's probably true most places. And so that will be a never-ending process for us. But we also really want to make sure that data is useful beyond just conservation. So we've worked with our resource protection folks, as well as customer service to have that data be accessible more broadly than just in conservation. But the big thing I'll say is you just have to start somewhere. So don't let trying to make a perfect coding process stop you from starting coding because it's never going to be perfect. You're going to learn a lot along the way. There's a lot of other utilities who are going down this road already, and we're all here to help each other and talk to one another. But once you get started, it's easier than you think. It's hard when you're first starting, but once you get started, it becomes easier than you think. And there's a lot of availability with that data to use it for something beneficial. So don't think that you're just coding just to code. You're coding, but there's an end goal there also to do analysis at the end of it. So thank you.
Thanks, everyone. So I'm Kim O'Kane. I'm with the California Data Collaborative, and I'm going to talk to you about my personal journey on trying to find benchmarking. Part of my work with the city of Santa Monica when I was there and implementing their water neutrality ordinance. And then I'm going to talk about some of the tools and resources that the collaborative has to offer. So the city of Santa Monica has a water neutrality ordinance, and essentially it caps water use for all new developments, major remodels, tenant improvements. And essentially the reason that we did this was for water self-sufficiency. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't importing any more water. We wanted to rely solely on our groundwater and alternative water resources. And so this new ordinance went into effect in 2017. And basically it was really just to curb the water use for the hundreds of new mixed use developments that were going in, where they were going to have several stories of multifamily and retail at the bottom. And so when council asked me to write this ordinance, sounded great. And I was like, I'll just go and get benchmarking data, and then we'll just be able to say, okay, designers, and architects, just, on your plans, tell us how much water you're going to use for every use, clothes washers, dishwashers, irrigation. And if you don't have that, we'll just have a really cool calculator for you, and you can just go in and download your benchmarking data. And after 2 years, I could not find any of that actual data for CII. I talked to people from all over the world and couldn't really find what I needed. Why is that important? Well, it made my job a little bit harder, but really what we learned in that process was that not only was there no real benchmarking data from water agencies, but also the architects and engineers didn't know how to actually come up with the water use for those individual projects. So they were looking at they were just looking at, sewer use and maximum flow for the entire building. So this is what we were really working with. And the reason that I wanted to use benchmarking is because I really thought it had a lot of potential. And it was something that a few of us in the water efficiency section had started talking about for a while. And it was really to look at improving our water supply and demand so we could really start forecasting if we knew how much water all of these potential new developments were going to use. We wanted to give the property managers, the facility engineers, the power to be their own water managers. And we wanted to improve our own water efficiency programs and policies that we were implementing. And then we wanted to make our regulations and our ordinances very streamlined. And ultimately, we wanted to be able to, promote innovation and best management practices. So like Martha was saying, like, how far down the rabbit hole do you want to go for your benchmarking? And it depends on what your uses were. For us, we really needed to compare like to like. So I wanted to be able to compare like a Honeycrisp apple to a Honeycrisp apple, not a Granny Smith apple. Because at the end of the day, we were using the water estimated demand to actually make a water budget that we were going to bill that property. So we had to get it right because we didn't want to be like, well, we think you're going to use 100,000 gallons, but in reality, you're using 500,000 gallons a year. And then their budgeting and everything would be off, as well as our estimates for our own water supply. So that was really the intent behind it. We wanted to be able to just, look at a hotel or a mixed use development in this case. And we knew a lot of the developments that were coming in were going to have 2 or 3 bedrooms. They were each going to have their own washer and dryer, a dishwasher. There was going to be a gym. There was going to be a pool on the top. And then there was going to be open retail space at the bottom. And that retail space was going to be blank. So that was a big question. Like, how do you define an estimated demand for an empty space that we don't know what's going to go in there? So that's really what we were looking for. Like I said, no benchmarking data. Our billing system had limitations, and I think Martha ended up putting all of your data into your CRM system. So in our billing system at that time, we had no place to put any kind of NAICS code or anything like that. So it ended up just kind of going in the notes section, which is not really easy to get information out. So that was definitely an issue for us. And then just coming up with the water budget, the benchmarking data to begin with, how do you calculate new construction water demand versus a tenant improvement where they're in a warehouse and they're only putting in a new bathroom? So those were some of the challenges. The architects we worked with, we didn't do this ordinance in a silo. We actually worked with a great group of people, including lots of architects, folks in the building industry. And at the end of the day, like I said, they couldn't really come up with the data that we needed. We used lots of Excel spreadsheets, and you know how that goes. One mistake, and then you've got bad data. And it was limited staffing. It was just me. So this is how I felt at the end of the day. Benchmarking wish list. This is my personal wish list, and I would love to talk to as many of you out there after this if this wish list meets your needs, and maybe we can work together. But I would love to have some kind of water industry standardization. Like Martha was saying, they have 19, California is looking at 18, but those are broad categories. How far down do we need to go to actually do really good water conservation work and supply forecasting with this modeling? Working with our billing system providers to ask them to provide more space in our billing system so that we can track and benchmark appropriately. Working with water agencies across the board so that we're just all on the same page. And maybe, even coming together or something that we could do with the collaborative and doing some research around this so that we're really looking at the data and putting it to good use. Working on data visualization tools that can support one another as we go through these different efforts, and really just helping our customers become managers. And so we want to work collaboratively. That's what we do at the CADC. We work with our members and other water agencies and partners. Many of you are here today just for this. And so we do this through you know, the software tool that we have. And if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, you can see us, our platform at the visitor or the sponsor booth. And this is what we're working on right now. We've got some of our folks from our team who are working on this diligently as we speak. We're revamping our analytics tools so that we can do more segmenting. So as part of our member dues, our agencies are able to access the software system. And the revamp that we're going to be launching later this month, which I'm so excited about, will have this function. So we'll have some preliminary data that we're from the state that has some of the benchmarking data already for disclosable buildings, those buildings over 50,000 square feet. And then if you want to go in and you know it's, you know, a hotel and you see that's got a pool from an aerial map, or you know it has cooling towers, you can tag and segment this as many ways as you want in order to, you know, be able to target those customers and prioritize them for your different programs. We're also working on a guidebook with San Diego County Water Authority and CalWEP. So this is another kind of first step in benchmarking and looking at our large landscapes that have dedicated irrigation meters. Just another way, like Martha was saying, trying to find those businesses that you can really target for high water use and get them into your programs. And we would love to work with you all. And that's it for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Gabriel.
Thank you very much. Actually, great presentations. By the way, it's going to be a little tough to top them up, but here I'm going to be trying to give you a different perspective now, guys. Let me quickly ask you, how many people that works for water utilities are here? If you can raise your hands. Perfect, perfect. How many consultants we have here? Awesome. Maintenance managers? None. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure I asked that question to be able to tailor the presentation to the audience. So let me start by basically telling you that the perspective I'm going to bring you guys is from that of a consultant or owner of a building that is being required to benchmark. Let me just start off by telling you about us. We are a company that's been around since the 1980s, over 200 employees. We do serve commercial, schools, residential customers, and design programs, work with programs, delivery, different types of energy efficiency and water conservation programs statewide. Now, building energy benchmarking programs, what is it? So just to give you a little background on this, this is California Central. There is a requirement in California that comes with a couple of legislations. There was a legislation that was passed a few years back. It was AB 1103 that required every building over 10,000 square feet to benchmark at a point of transaction, real estate transaction or refinancing transaction. That had no enforcement mechanism. There were a lot of issues about consumer protection, right, about their information. So it was recalled. The CEC was the enforcement agency that went back to the legislature and pointed out the issues with this specific legislation. So the state assembly produced a new bill, AB 802, that addressed all the previous issues that had to do with customer concerns about their privacy, right? And also put an enforcement mechanism to be able to enforce it. So now this new bill requires for buildings of 50,000 square feet and above to be able to report their water usages, their energy usages, and put them into the DOE tool, which is called Energy Star, which every single state, I think, can use it. But it's a requirement in California, right? And what the goal is to be able to share this information and be able to compare buildings, one from the other, right? How the new bill addressed the concerns about privacy was that the bill requires utilities to be able to provide you with that information, right, without disclosing the specific uses of customers. For example, in a multifamily building, right, you have several accounts, but the utilities are required to provide 12 months of information without specific accounts. They'll have to provide to you the entire usage of that specific site. That being said, that leads us into our experience doing it, right? We had several customers throughout the state, and one of them where we had to benchmark about 40 sites, right? What we did is we first of all, try to find the path of least resistance. How did we do that? It was, first of all, seeing the tools that were available and what Energy Star did. Energy Star has a good amount of videos explaining to you how to use it for different purposes, right? So we went through those videos, and it boils down to a couple of things, right? One is you need to have your account meter information, your billing information, your usage, the cost, and all the different bills from all the different utilities. Now, one of the nice things that this tool has is that they have pushed, actually the state has pushed all investor-owned utilities to be able to provide that data automatically and integrate it to the tool. So for example, if you have a large utility like a SoCal Gas or an SCE, they are forced to share that information directly with the tool. So you can go into the tool and find that information, click the utility, and it'll pull it for you. However, there are several municipal utilities and smaller utilities and smaller water utilities out there that are resource constrained, right? They don't have that ability to be able to provide you with that information and link it to the tool. So that's where the challenges came, right? So there are several challenges because some utilities will be able to only provide you a PDF format. You know, they'll be able to send you bills. Or, I mean, there's different ways you can get this data, but at the end of the day, you have to gather that data, be able to put it in a format that is very specific to the tool. So now what we did in the process, actually, we couldn't show it right here, but we developed this video for anyone that's interested in doing and using it, right? It's a video that sums up the whole experience of energy benchmarking, and it's a resource that we'll be able to provide. If you go to rhainc.com, there's a resource section, and it's about the 4th or the 5th resource down where we have this video, where we actually show you how we went about the data the data we gather and how we input all this information, the results, and how the tools use, because the tool also provides you with Excel sheets and certain templates that you need to utilize to be able to do that. So like I said before, Energy Star has a good amount of videos and resources out there. With this video, what we did is sum them all up and be able to give you a summary on how to go about and do it, right? So one of the things that in the process we were able to do is basically utilize this information, right? But what do? One of the things that we know is now it's a law. It's required by California. And California is really now pushing this heavily, right? To the point that there is an enforcement mechanism. What does that mean? That means that they can charge you up to $2,000 per day by not complying. And it's still a debate on how they're going to go about and charge you $2,000 per day. Is it going to be per account? Is it going to be per type of resource? And they still haven't decided what that's going to be. But one thing I can tell you that the CEC has been sending letters to all the buildings that are 50,000 square feet and above, requesting for them to comply. So if there's consultants out here, this is the opportunity for you guys to go out there, provide the service, and be able to help people that needs that help, right? On the other side, for utility folks, right, there is an obligation here, which is being able to provide that data in a way that doesn't compromise your customers' privacy. So in the process, we conducted benchmarking. So we benchmark all these 40 buildings, we input all that data, and that gave us scores for all different buildings. It was able to help us to identify all the different buildings by scores. What does that do? So for example, on buildings that were using a lot more water versus the others, right? And they had the lowest score, we were able to identify that there were leaks, right? That something else was going on that was different, and help us also put a plan, right? Whether it's on the water side or in the energy side, you can put a plan by utilizing that data, right? Whether it's a capital expenditure of you being able to put monitors or controls on the water irrigation systems, or replace air conditioning units or whatever it is that you need to do on the energy side. We helped us prioritize all of these buildings, put a plan, and then verify all the different opportunities that we had based on the scoring. Now the score is from 0 to 100. 75 gives you the opportunity to certify your building, right? So what does that mean? Certifying your building is an extra process that you can go through. It will require additional data, but it gives you a plaque, gives you bragging rights to say that your building is certified. Two is there is some nice information that I'll go over that Energy Star put together about Energy Star certified buildings and the benefits of them. The other piece that we had to do is verify the savings after we put a plan in place, we implemented it, make sure that we didn't have a snapback. What do we mean by a snapback? It's basically going back to the previous consumption. So in some buildings we did that, but a good amount of times what we found out is that as we either updated things either we put nicer equipment, better equipment, people started to utilize that equipment more. So there's still some follow-up that's required, right? And at the end of the day, like I said, I mean, you have a chance to be able to certify those specific sites and be able to put that plaque and celebrate if you do certify your buildings. Now, lessons learned. So one of the things we learned throughout the process is that the data is not always good. So you have to be able to verify your data. And data is not also as easily accessible, and to be able to gather that data might not necessarily be a simple process. If you are working with local utilities or municipal utilities that do not have the resources to provide you the data the way you would like to be provided, you're going to have to do a lot more work, right? You're going to have to basically grab that data and figure out the way to best put it into the format that's required. On our case, for example, we had over 300 accounts, water, gas, that didn't have the sophistication nor the digital data that we were expecting. So we had to create a small little software to be able to extract the data, right, from the PDFs electronically and be able to put it into an Excel, then put it into the format that the tool Energy Star provides. So the other piece that we learned is that the first year is the hardest. The first time you do it, it's really hard. You're required to put a good amount of information, more information, because you're establishing an account. But supporting and maintaining is a lot easier, because all you have to do from that point on is be able to update the data every 12 months. And it's still a requirement. Every year you'll have to do it in California. Again, disclaimer, California, it's not every state. One of the things that this tool did for us, it will help us determine all the different buildings that needed help. And utilizing that, put a plan, right? If you are in the business of real estate, or if you are managing a portfolio or maintenance, for example, you do need a plan, right? And this is a tool to help you identify areas of deficiencies through the usage, right? Because through the usage, you can determine that you have a leak, that you don't have controls in an irrigation area, or that you need air conditioning changes, right, in a place, or maybe your lighting is not good. So those are different things that you can identify through this, well, through the usage, right, by going to the buildings and then verifying what the issues are and then put a plan in place. That plan in place doesn't necessarily need to be a plan for 1 year, right? It could be a multi-year plan. You can definitely talk to the different folks out there that are making the decisions of providing you with a budget and create a plan. Now, this slide is a very interesting slide, because I actually stole it from Energy Star. It was a presentation of theirs, but it gives you interesting data, right? It's the value of benchmarking, basically. If you guys notice, they classify it in 3 buckets, right? The rental rate premium, the sales premium, the occupancy premium. So all they're saying is, look, we gathered data of all these certified buildings out there, and we were able to identify that they can actually rent at a higher rate, right? And if you guys can see it, for example, we'll go down CoStar, right, group, and USD. They're based on their portfolio, they were able to charge about all the way up to 16% more. than anybody else that was not certified. For example, on the sales premium, they were able to sell their buildings for 6% more than the average building, right? And their occupancy premiums, as you guys can see, they were able to, if they were renting those facilities, whether they were multifamily or commercial, they were able to rent them 3% more. So this is actually very telling, right? Because when we first started doing, right, people take it different ways. Oh, why is the state getting our business? Why are they making us do all of this? At the end of the day, it's about conserving resources, right? We are in a time where we thought water was a renewable resource, right? But it's scarce now. So we need to conserve it. So there's the positive to all of this, right? And you guys can see it. There's a financial benefit. So I think as utilities, we can also get our customers to comply with all of this by showing them the financial benefit that there is to this. Now, we're probably going to set up the panel for Q&As. Thank you very much for attending this meeting. And I'd like to point out my wife and my daughter are over there watching my presentation. Thank you for coming.
All right, so I'm going to have the panel come up and sit here, and we'll have a little bit of time for questions. Does anybody have any questions?
My question I struggle with that Martha in particular, you mentioned, is that you have CII customers and you group them into categories. There's 18 or so, and Energy Star has a set too. And so that really does a good job at categorizing maybe the type of business. But then there's the type of water use, which is a whole other kind of parallel layer. And then you mentioned like the bank, it does dedicated irrigation meters. Well, irrigation is like an end use, and it's a big one in CII. And I just want to know, do we need like two categories, like one with the type of business it is, and then some other category that really kind of puts it into, well, is it outdoor? Is it cooling? Is it indoor, just bathroom use, or is it industrial and those types of things?
That's a great question. So every billing system is going to be very different. And so at SAWS, our billing system allows us to see if it's irrigation or domestic water, indoor water, right, within our billing system. And so we're not having to categorize in that way. So like banks, a lot of them don't have a dedicated irrigation meter. So I'll say that first. But my view is we went to the 6-digit NAICS codes for that exact reason, that we want to look at their primary water use. I'm not interested in their business practice. I'm not interested in, are they a grocery company, or is this a warehouse versus a grocery store, right? I'm interested in how that property is using water, which is why we've coded based on the primary water use of the property. But then within that, we're able to say within banks, there's this many dedicated irrigation meters. That's an attribute of our billing system. Other folks are going to have a billing system that may group by property. We group by account. And so there's intricacies there that you have to figure out for your own system. But I think being able to say there's this much irrigation within a class, one of the 18 or 19 groups that we roll up to, being able to say there's this much irrigation versus this much domestic will be useful. But it's going to be hard because every utility is so different. I don't know if that answers, but.
Yeah, Marty, there's a microphone right back there.
So thank you for the informative presentations. It's a laborious process at best. My question has to do with upgrades or updates to benchmarking. Can you, what are your thoughts about frequency and the types of updates that will be necessary to keep the systems current?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to your billing system and how you initially set it up. So I know a lot of people have started using Excel spreadsheets and are kind of updating that, but there's, challenges to that, because if you've got one person who's managing that, they leave the agency or something happens, there's, a mistake that's put into that Excel spreadsheet. How do you know that you're actually getting the right information? So that's what I've been hearing, is that it's been updated that way. But I know Martha's using a CRM, so I don't know if that's more automated through your customer service.
Yeah, so for SAWS, our accounts, when someone closes an account and a new account gets opened, that's a new account number. And so we're recoding that at that time. And so a bank is a good example. Again, here, a bank is likely still going to be a bank, where an office building will still be an office building, but other properties may change their use type. And so when we recode, we're trying to figure out what is the use type now at that property. A shopping center, like a strip mall, kind of a shopping center with a lot of different tenants in it, we've coded as a shopping center rather than as there's a coffee shop and a laundromat, because those are more likely to change more frequently. And we may not know when they change if the owner of the shopping center is the water account holder, right? And so we're updating right now just the magnitude of customers that we have in this area. We're updating as people create new accounts. But I also think there's value, if possible, to track when you put a code to an account or to a property, and be able to update that every 5 years or 3 years, and kind of set a recurring cycle to come back to it.
So, yeah, I'm Jörg Tonner from Arab. Really appreciate the presentation. It's great. And I really appreciate the honesty about lessons learned and issues around data collections and the quality of the data. And that's really what my question is about. So you all mentioned that there are problems with the data you're getting. So I'm wondering, are you using other related data sets to check your information, to check what you collected? I'm thinking about land use data, populations, maybe information about traffic. Is that something you're using? And then that's part of the question. And then the second one, are you already thinking ahead in terms of using machine learning AI to basically, again, to verify the data you collected and see, is there any consistencies, any issues, anything you can maybe correct automatically?
Yes and yes. So the platform that we're working on for the California Data Collaborative, we are looking at open source data, or data that we might be able to purchase to help add layers to what's coming out of the billing system. So we're looking at maybe Google Business. It's going to be a manual process, but eventually we would love to have some type of AI or predictive modeling where we can just, we can scan imagery, and we can say, okay, this is, it's got a pool, it's got cooling tower, or things like that. And then we can have someone go in and verify. But those are definitely things that we've been talking about at the CADC. So I'm sure a lot of other people out there are way down the rabbit hole and may have some more information too.
I'll say we haven't gotten that far. I'm interested in where we could go with that, but we're primarily doing it manually. So Google Maps is our best friend when we've been doing coding, and sometimes having to call the property. Sometimes it's obvious, but we haven't really merged with other tools yet.
If I could add, so the Energy Star tool does allow you to, actually it has the capability of classifying the buildings and getting a good amount of information that you might be looking on the utility side. The problem I see that is not enforceable in different states, or, right, you for example, in California, it's only for buildings 50,000 square feet and above, but there is a classification there that allows you to tell the type of building type, right, that you have. And if you want to get certified, there's additional questions that you have to fulfill and be able to verify in the field. So maybe there's an opportunity there. Then that's just me thinking, right, that there will be collaborations eventually between Energy Star and the different utilities, right? What I've noticed, for example, in the process is that Energy Star does have updates, right? So there's somebody that's looking at this at the Energy Star and making updates for different categories of buildings or different items in Energy Star. So maybe there's a place for the utilities to have a say, right, on the data that's collected for your own purposes, and be able to kind of across the board use the same data.
And I think that's great when you can use that kind of data. If you ask a customer to classify themselves, the grocery store example I gave, they're gonna say this is a grocery company, right? And so as Kim said, you have to have eyes on it also. It's a manual process. You use those tools, and then you also have to look at it. For us, when we looked at the banks, we found a bank that was actually an office building owned by a banking company. And so that's a time where then eyes on it, we manually updated that to an office building.
So some of the things, well, one thing I kept hearing during the questions is opportunity. I think there's a lot of opportunity in this area. And bringing up AI and machine learning, that is definitely the frontier there, right? So there's a lot of, it's a very complex process. There's a lot to do. You may run into some obstacles and you're going to have to figure out how to get around them, but just have to let yourself fail and learn from your failures. I love that quote about being, the enemy of good is perfect. That's a good one. So it's an ongoing data intensive process. And unfortunately, or fortunately, there are some tools, there's some opportunity. The CIDC has a classification tool they're working on. We have the Energy Star Portfolio Manager we can look at for inspiration. There's is a long road ahead to laying the groundwork for this intelligent CII water use benchmarking. But once we do lay that groundwork, then we can use this to really target our conservation efforts towards those who really need this help. And with that, I'd like to just thank everybody. This is especially the panelists. I really appreciate you coming here and providing this information. And does anybody have any last comments or remarks? Nope. Okay. Well, that's it.